Hello fellow Brawlers, I'm KairosTime, and it is time for the Boss Olympics. It's been over a year and a half since the last one. We've had 16 new Brawlers added to the game. The second gadgets. We didn't have second gadgets last time. Plus, all the Brawlers are level 11, so everybody immediately gets better than last time. Brawlers are allowed to use their attacks, their supers, their gadgets, their star powers, and any other weird thing that they can use, except for gears, in order to defeat the boss as fast as possible. And to make things interesting, I put all 54 Brawlers into a randomized bracket where only one can be the winner. Your goal is to guess the Brawler that wins each round. Poco versus Gene. Now lucky for Gene, he gets matched up against Poco. Honestly, neither of them are very good in this test, and Gene probably shouldn't have made it past the first round. Gene has a slow reload speed, Poco deals almost no damage, even with his screeching solo star power adding a little bit of damage with each super. Poco gets dead last with a score of 2 minutes and 33 seconds. Belle versus Amber. Now Belle does have an advantage over a lot of the Brawlers, and that is the fact that after her super hits the boss one time, she deals over 2,000 damage with each shot. Now due to her slow reload speed, it does take her 1 minute 26 seconds to kill the boss, which is enough for 47th place, and Amber actually gets to move on, as you can imagine. Rosa versus Colonel Ruffs. Surprisingly, Colonel Ruffs actually beats Rosa and moves on, okay? Rosa's best score is when she uses her Thorny Glove star power to increase the damage that she can deal with every single attack. She beats the boss in 1 minute and 4 seconds and gets 40th place. Nani versus Penny. Now Nani charges up her super with just 2 ammo, and then she uses her super and moves around so she can use her autofocus star power to deal a little bit extra damage, and that's all thanks to the fact that she actually reloads ammo while she's using her super. Nani defeats the boss in 53 seconds and gets 30th place. Colette versus Brock. Now Brock obviously beats Colette. I mean, just look at these supers, right? Colette struggles to charge her super up for the first time. After that, she's able to recharge it a lot quicker, but even with her gadget dealing additional damage, it still takes her 45 seconds to take out the boss, and that's only enough for 22nd place, which just shows how unlucky this matchup is for her this first round. Mr. P versus Bull. Now this is another really tough call, but Mr. P ends up losing to Bull by just a few seconds, even though he's able to get 4 porters on the ground thanks to his porter reinforcements gadget. This is kind of an unlucky matchup for Mr. P because he defeats the boss in 36 seconds, which puts him in 17th out of all the Brawlers, almost enough for the top 16. Karl versus Lola. This is another really close call, but Karl actually beats Lola. Lola gets a lot of extra damage over time from her improvised star power. She actually gets her ego at just the right distance so that she and her super can deal as much damage as possible without missing any projectiles at all. She defeats the boss in 43 seconds and gets 20th place. Edgar versus Tick. Now Edgar actually beats Tick by a couple of seconds. Tick uses his Mind Mania gadget to double the damage from 3 of his attacks, plus his automatic reload star power increases his reload speed. Even with all of that and recycling his supers though, Tick scores 50 seconds and 28th place because of his slow reload speed. Piper versus Fang. Now honestly, I thought Fang was actually going to win this. He deals tons of damage with his main attack and his super, but Piper is still able to deal damage faster thanks to her super. Fang defeats the boss in 60 seconds and gets 37th place. Frank versus Byron. And honestly, it's not a surprise that Byron loses to Frank since he's more of a healer than a damage dealer, even with the help of his super recharging itself. He ends up defeating the boss in 1 minute 14 seconds and gets 45th place. Serge versus Mortis. Mortis does a lot of damage really quickly, but he has a really slow reload speed, which is exactly why Serge beats him. Even with his survival shovel gadget, it takes him 2 minutes 15 seconds to take out the boss, which puts him in 52nd place. Sandy versus Jackie. Now Sandy is actually the second worst brawler at taking out the boss, so it's no surprise that Jackie moves on. Each of his attacks deals just tiny amounts of damage, plus his Rude Sand star power barely helps him at all. He ends up defeating the boss in 2 minutes 21 seconds and gets 53rd place. Lou versus Leon. Now Lou's attack can deal a fair amount of damage, but it's nowhere close to the amount of damage that Leon can do, especially up close. Lou defeats the boss in 1 minute 26 seconds, which puts him in 46th place, and Leon gets to move on. Ems versus Gail. Ems is able to deal extra damage right away thanks to her bad karma star power. She also has her super activated pretty much the entire time since it can recharge so quickly, and Ems ends up defeating the boss in 1 minute 1 seconds, and Gail gets to move on because each attack just deals so much damage. Barley versus B. Now this is a pretty tough call. Barley's attacks deal a lot of damage, but B does get that supercharge shot every other attack. Plus she has her super and everything, and Barley has her extra noxious star power to help out as well. In the end, Barley does lose to B and defeats the boss in 55 seconds and gets 32nd out of all the brawlers in the game. El Primo versus Pam. Now I could see why people would think that El Primo would actually win this, but Pam actually gets gets to move on, okay? El Primo does get to use his gadget and his El Fuego star power to deal some extra damage, and he actually defeats the boss in 45 seconds, which puts him in 21st, but that's not enough to compete against Pam and her high damaging attack. Nida versus Shelley. Now Nida gets off to a really slow start since it takes her 6 shots to charge up her super. Her Hyper Bear star power does allow her to annihilate the boss once she gets it out though, but Shelley's super is just insane and deals way more damage. Nida takes out the boss in 34 seconds and got a really unlucky placement this first round because she could have made it into the top 16. 8-Bit versus BB. Now 8-Bit places down his super as fast as he can so that all of his shots can deal an additional 50% damage thanks to his boosted booster star power. He then uses his gadget to triple the amount of projectiles from 3 shots, and 8-Bit is able to defeat the boss in 37 seconds, which puts him in 18th place, while BB, one of our top players, actually gets to move on to the next round. Jesse versus Buzz. Now Buzz doesn't have a super, gadget, or star power that helps him even a little bit in this test. And while his attack does deal a lot of damage, it's not nearly enough to beat Jesse. Buzz scores 51 seconds and gets 29th place. Meg versus Ash. Now Ash starts out with his rage bar empty, but once it's charged up, it stays charged until the boss is destroyed. And his Mad as Heck star power helps him reload his attacks even faster. It's still not enough to beat Meg's score, but he does take out the boss in 1 minute and gets 36th place. Max versus Stu. Now Stu's super keeps the boss on fire pretty much the entire time, and every little bit of extra damage is really helpful. His main attack is strong, but it takes too long to reload, and Max beats him by a few seconds thanks to her fast reload speed. Stu defeats the boss in 1 minute 19 seconds, which gets him at 44th place. Grom versus Sprout. Now Sprout and Grom have pretty similar attacks when it comes to this test, but Sprout's attack is weaker and its super doesn't help it at all, which makes Grom the clear winner. Sprout requires 2 minutes 14 seconds and gets 51st place, one of the worst brawlers for this test. And with that first round done, we have 32 brawlers still in the competition, but only 16 of them can move on. Which brawler do you think is going to take the victory? Gene versus Colt. Now Gene got really lucky in the first matchup against Poco, but his luck has run out. Thanks to his slow reload speed, it takes him 2 minutes 7 seconds to take out the boss, which puts him in 50th place out of the 54 brawlers in the game. Amber versus Colonel Ruff. Now I'm going to be completely honest, okay? To get the recording for Amber, I had to take so many recordings. This was very difficult to get just right. The goal is to light the boss on fire at the start thanks to her gadget, and then put another puddle of oil on the ground as soon as possible so that her Scorch and Siphon star power can increase her reload speed between supers, all while making sure that the boss is lit on fire the entire time. There's a chance that I could have gotten a slightly better time if everything was done perfectly, but it would not have helped her beat Colonel Ruff, and she beats the boss in 1 minute and 3 seconds and gets 39th place. Rico versus Penny. Now I tried using Penny's Last Blast star power, but getting all the bombs to hit the boss in the training area just it's kind of hard to do, but even then, Penny gets the most damage out of her cannon by using her Balls of Fire star power with her Captain's Compass gadget. Penny defeats the boss in 49 seconds and gets 27th place, while Rico clearly moves on. Brock versus Bull. Now Bull gets to use his Berserker star power, which doubles his reload speed when he's below that low HP. He also pushes the boss up against the wall so that his supers take almost no time, and then he can focus on attacking. He still loses against Brock, who's one of the best, but he does take out the boss in an impressive 32 seconds and ends up taking 12th place. Karl versus Edgar. Now Edgar charges his super several times and deals decent amount of damage thanks to his hard landing star power. His reload speed is very fast, but it's not enough to deal as much damage as Karl's able to do. Edgar defeats the boss in 48 seconds and takes 24th place. Griff versus Piper. Now Piper's best bet is actually to use her super to get some distance between her and the boss, then fire off attacks between each super. In this boss test, her snappy sniping star power is actually better than her ambush star power, and honestly, this is pretty tricky to do, and I probably could have improved her time, but after a few recordings, I'm pretty happy with this. Piper defeats the boss in 56 seconds and ties for 33rd place. Terra versus Frank. Now Frank uses his gadget to double the power of 3 of his attacks, and I tested Frank using his super versus not using his super, since his super actually has such a long delay and it doesn't deal him any more damage than his regular attack, and it turns out that by using his super, it saves him 0.2 seconds compared to not using his super, okay? So yes, using his super is better than not using his super. Frank defeats the boss in 1 minute 14 seconds and gets 41st place, while Terra moves on to the next round. Daryl versus Serge. Now Serge uses his super to bump the boss up against the wall so that by the time he's fully upgraded, he can use his to the max star power to deal over 5,000 damage to the boss with every single attack. This has to be aimed absolutely perfectly or it won't deal as much damage. So after several attempts, I had to go with the best attempt, or I could have spent spent hours trying to get every single freaking attack to land perfectly on the boss. Maybe you guys could get better time, but for now, Serge defeats the boss in 48.2 seconds and gets 25th place, whereas Daryl gets to move on. Jackie versus Bo. Now I let Jackie use her counter crush star power by pulling the boss over to where the sniper bot was. It's a really small advantage, and Jackie only has her main attack to rely on, so I think it's fair. Even with this little trick though, she takes 1 minute 53 seconds to defeat the boss, which isn't even close to beating Bo. She comes in 49th place, and Bo moves on. Leon versus Gail. Now Leon also only has his main attack to rely on, and at close range is one of the strongest in the game. However, Gail kind of gets to cheat with the fact that all 5 of his projectiles from each attack actually hit the boss. So Gail moves on, and Leon scores 1 minute 15 seconds, and that puts him in 43rd place. Spike versus B. Spike is obviously the winner here, and I tried my best to get a recording where all of B's supers deal max damage, and I also get max damage with all of her gadgets, but either I'd accidentally miss a B from her gadget, or I wouldn't be close enough to get max damage with her super, or I'd focused so hard and forget to auto attack as frequently as B can, okay? If somebody can get a better time, I would love to see it, but for now, her record is 48.5 seconds and 26th place. Pam versus Shelly. Now Pam does insane damage with each ammo she fires, and she deals a little bit of extra damage thanks to her Mama's Squeeze star power once her super is placed. She's not able to beat Shelly's time, but she does take out the boss in 40 seconds, which puts her in 19th place. BB versus Jessie. Both of these brawlers take a little bit of time for them to charge up their supers, and once they do get them on the supers, that's when the damage really starts to happen. Jessie's super is very impressive, especially once she gets to use that recoil spring gadget, but it's not as impressive as BB. Jessie defeats the boss in 46 seconds and gets 23rd place. Squeak versus Meg. Now Meg takes a little bit of time to charge up her super thanks to a recent nerf, but once she gets into her mecha, she deals a lot of damage with each attack and also with each sword swing. It's not enough to beat Squeak though, and Meg beats the boss in 53 seconds and gets 31st place. Crow versus Max. Now Max's super doesn't deal any damage, but her run and gun star power allows her to reload faster depending on how much distance she's traveled, and her super makes her go faster, which means that she gets a very slight increase to her reload speed every time she uses her super. Max defeats the boss in 1 minute 14 seconds and gets 42nd place, while Crow moves on. Dynamite versus Grom. This is a battle between the throwers. Now Grom aims his attack just at the right spot so that he can get maximum damage with his X Factor star power, and his super also deals a lot of damage, but Dynamite is able to recycle his super over and over and over again, which just puts Grom out of the competition. Grom defeats the boss in 1 minute 29 seconds and takes 48th place. That's the end of the second round, and now we are down to only 16 brawlers. When this round is done, only 8 will remain. Colt versus Colonel Ruffs. It's pretty obvious that Colt is going to win this, okay? But Colonel Ruff does start out by getting his super and pushing the boss over so that when he activates his gadget, as many rockets fall from the sky and deal damage to the boss as possible. He still requires 59 seconds and gets 35th place. Rico versus Brock, and this is a battle of the supers. Brock uses his rocket number 4 star power so that he can charge his super as fast as possible, and this is where things get really tricky with Brock. It requires nearly perfect aiming, but if you aim Brock's super just below the boss, 5 rockets from his super will hit the boss each time, which allows Brock to completely recharge his super. This took a ton of practice and many recording attempts, but I got it just right, and Brock's able to defeat the boss in 32 seconds, which puts him in 11th place. Karl versus Griff. Now Karl bounces his pickaxe off the wall to deal a lot of damage and charges super up very quickly. He then activates his super immediately after his pickaxe is thrown, so that when the pickaxe hits the boss on the way back, it actually helps to recharge his super just enough so that Karl can instantly activate his super again. Griff obviously wins this matchup, but Karl does take out the boss in 33 seconds, which puts him in 15th place. Terra versus Daryl. Now Daryl uses his gadget right on top of the boss to deal a huge amount of damage to it, okay? He uses his super mainly to keep his reload speed doubling from his rolling reload star power, and I'll admit that I could have used Daryl's gadget a bit better with some crazy precision, but it wouldn't change the outcome of this matchup. Daryl defeats the boss in 33 seconds and gets 14th place. Bo versus Gail. Now Gail can hit the boss with all of his projectiles since it has such a large hitbox, and this has helped Gail a lot in this competition, but it's not enough to defeat Bo. Gail defeats the boss in 56 seconds, which ties him with Piper for 33rd place. Spike versus Shelly. Now after Shelly charges her super, she's able to use her super in between every single attack, and at the start, it's really entertaining to watch. Even with that many supers though, she's still no match for Spike, who I think actually gets to release more supers than she does. Either way, Shelly defeats the boss in 27 seconds, which puts her in 10th place. BB versus Squeak. Now both of these brawlers have supers that can deal a lot of damage in this test specifically, and unfortunately for Squeak, his super just takes a little bit too long to explode, so he ends up losing to BB. Still, he has an impressive score of 29 seconds and gets 9th place. Crow versus Dynamite. Now, Dynamite super recharges half of itself, and then one regular attack is all he needs to completely recharge another attack. But obviously, Crow's gonna win in this matchup. Dynamite does defeat the boss in 33 seconds, which is great. It's just only enough for 13th place. And that completes the third round of matches. We are now down to our final 8, and I may have actually rigged this tournament to make sure that the 8 best brawlers get to face on from this point on. This is where we really get to see the champions of DPS. Colt versus Rico. Now, both these brawlers are able to deal insane amounts of damage with both their attacks and their supers. However, Rico's super is able to fully recharge itself, whereas Colt does require an attack between each super to recharge it. Now, if he's using his gadget whenever he needs to, Colt actually doesn't have to spend any time reloading while facing the boss. He defeats the boss in 26 seconds and gets 5th place, and Rico gets to move on to the semifinals. Griff versus Terra. Now, Terra has actually been able to do very well in this test thanks to her second gadget. Interestingly enough, I actually tested her with only using one super versus repeatedly using her super over and over and over again, and she actually does save just a little bit of time by only using one super, because if she repeatedly uses her supers, her black portal star power actually stops attacking the boss between supers. Either way though, she can't beat Griff. She defeats the boss in 27 seconds, and that puts her in 7th place. Bo versus Spike. Now, Bo's super deals massive damage, but it does take a second for all 3 of those mines to detonate on the boss. Thanks to his Snare Bear star power, all mines do hit the boss every single time too though. He defeats the boss in 28 seconds, which puts him in 8th place, and Spike moves on to the semifinals. BB versus Crow. Now, before attacking the boss, she actually wastes her home run bar so that the boss actually stays placed instead of getting knocked back into the wall. This position for the boss actually allows her bubbles to stack so much that there are 3 of them hitting the boss at all times until it's destroyed. In the past, I took the time to knock the boss in between the 2 walls over to the right, but now that BB is level 11, it's actually not worth it to take that time to do so, since now it's better for her to just deal more damage at the very start. BB defeats the boss in 26 seconds and gets 6th place. And there you have it, the final 4 brawlers. Let's see who makes it to the championship. Rico versus Griff. Now, Rico's super bouncy star power adds extra damage to not only each of his regular attacks, but also to each of his supers as well. Once he recharges the super, it recharges itself until this boss is gone, and by spamming supers up against the wall, Rico is able to defeat the boss in an impressive 19 seconds, which is just fast enough to land him in 4th place, but not fast enough to defeat Griff. Spike versus Crow. Now, Spike unloads his shots right on top of the boss to maximize damage and then use his gadget to deal insane damage while his shots reload. I know it's possible to deal even more damage with his gadget, but I was more concerned with making sure that every single attack dealt max damage, because that is by far more important than his gadget. Spike's able to get multiple supers on the ground at any time and even recharge them for free as well, and stack those supers on top of the boss. He defeats the boss in 17 seconds and gets 3rd place, but you can see it's not enough to defeat Crow. And that means we are down to the best 2 brawlers for taking out the boss. Griff has come out since the last boss test, and Crow was the previous champion. Let's see if he's still the champion. Griff versus Crow. Griff and Crow both have extremely powerful supers that recharge themselves instantly and deal just insane damage, right? It only takes them a couple seconds to get things charged up, and once that happens, they just shred through the boss. Griff defeats the boss in 13.6 seconds, while Crow defeats the boss in 12.9 seconds. And with less than a 1 second difference, Griff gets 2nd place and Crow takes 1st out of all 54 brawlers in the game. And that is the Boss Olympics. Were there brawlers that surprised you? Are you one of the many people using Kairos and Brawl Stars shop so you got every single round right? Now, I want to challenge you guys, okay? If there is a brawler that you think you could have done better with, I want you to film it. I want you to tag me on Twitter, Reddit, Instagram, because I'm pretty sure I did as good as I could, and if I didn't get it, I'm sorry. I'm doing my best. Hopefully you found the video entertaining. Make sure you guys subscribe for some more Brawl Stars Olympics and some more Clash mini content. That is Supercell's newest game, and check out my Free Fire channel right there. It doesn't currently have videos on it as I'm releasing this, but by the time you're watching this, maybe it does. Don't forget to use code Kairos to Brawl Stars shop and check out this video. And for now, this is KairosTime ticking by. We will see you in Brawl Stars.